Hello and welcome to this special interview for Adani Watch. AdaniWatch.org is a portal set up by the Bob Brown Foundation, which is based in Hobart, Tasmania, Australia. I am Paranjoy Guha Thakurta. I'm a journalist and I'm sitting in a hotel room in Bengaluru, Karnataka, in southern India. And with me online, I have activist and economist Prasenjit Bose. He's based in Kolkata in eastern India. And he has been very, very closely tracking recent developments concerning the Adani Group of companies. Thank you very much, Prasenjit, for giving us your time.
Thank you, Paranjoy, for having me.
Let's start with a little bit of a background. After the first Hindenburg research report came out in January of 2023, there was a big hue and cry after that. Hindenburg Research is a New York-based short-selling firm. And they came out with this report with a sensational headline. They described what was going on in India's Adani Group as the biggest corporate con in corporate history. The Adani Group is headed by Gautam Adani. He's one of the world's richest men. At the time that report came out, he was considered to be the world's third richest man. Currently, he's considered to be India's richest man, Asia's richest man, and he's also considered to be very, very close to Prime Minister Narendra Modi. So all this happened in January 2023. We are more than 18 months down the line. Elections have been conducted, and on the 10th of August, Hindenburg Research came out with another report pointing out that making very, very serious allegations concerning the chairperson of the Securities and Exchange Board of India, or SEBI. SEBI is India's regulator of India's financial markets, its capital markets, and the kind of allegations that were leveled against the current chairperson of SEBI, Madhavi Puri Buch, are unprecedented. Madhavi Puri Buch is the first woman to head SEBI. She's the first person from the private sector to head this regulatory authority. And she's also the first person who does not belong to the civil service. She's not a bureaucrat. As I just mentioned, she comes from the public sector, and she's the first person who does not belong to the Indian Administrative Service who's heading India's regulatory authority, the regulatory authority for India's financial markets. Immediately after the second Hindenburg research report came, she came up with, there were two responses, one by her and her husband, and another by SEBI itself, but that was unsigned. Now, these two responses seem to have muddied the water further. And this entire issue of conflict of interest seems to have become huge. The opposition party, the Indian National Congress, has held a series of media conferences where pointing out various corporate entities and corporate groups with which she has been associated. We are going to discuss the details, and there's been a clamor for her resignation. So I'm going to ask Prasenjit to give us an overview. Tell us a little bit, summarize the second Hindenburg research report. How significant is it vis-a-vis Madhavi Puri Buch, chairperson of the Securities and Exchange Board of India, and the Adani Group?
Well, it has just been about a month that the second Hindenburg report on the Indian securities market and the Adani Group came out. And as you have already mentioned, that immediately the very next day, both the SEBI chairperson along with her husband, they issued a private statement, and the SEBI came out with an unsigned statement. So nobody really knows who exactly, from which authority from the SEBI has issued that statement, but it was an official statement from the SEBI. And they responded to some of the issues that the Hindenburg had raised. So what are those issues? There are, I think, three main issues which the Hindenburg report about of 10th of August that had raised vis-a-vis the SEBI chairperson. First was regarding an investment which the SEBI chairperson had made in 2015 when she was a private citizen. She was based out of Singapore, and she had made a investment of around 872,000 US dollars, which if you apply 2015 exchange rate, it will come to somewhere around 5.5 crore Indian rupees at the prevailing exchange rate in 2015. She had made that investment through a Mumbai-based firm, which is earlier called the IIFL Wealth and Asset Management, which has been renamed as 361. Through that firm, she had made this investment in what is allegedly a shell company, and the structure of that shell company is one where in the previous Hindenburg report, it came out that the similar structure, similar companies based out, especially the Global Opportunities Fund and the Global Dynamic Opportunities Fund. This fund is based out of Bermuda, and the same fund was utilized by shell companies as linked to Vinod Adani. That was the main allegation which the Hindenburg first report had made. That
and for the sake of our viewers, Vinod Adani is the older brother of Gautam Adani, who heads the Adani Group, and he's a citizen of Cyprus.
Right. I think that just to recapitulate, the main allegation which the Hindenburg had made was that the Adani Group was basically recycling or round tripping their own funds through these shell companies whose beneficial ownership had been kept hidden, but they had exposed that many of these shell companies who had invested in the listed companies of the Adani Group in the Indian securities market, these shell companies were actually owned by Vinod Adani. That was the main allegation which Hindenburg first report had made. And the legal implication was that if the allegation is true, then almost all the listed companies of the Adani Group actually had promoter shareholding. That is the ownership of the owners, the promoter group. Their shareholding was way above the 75% threshold, which is mandated by the Indian securities market law. So a promoter group in any listed company cannot own shares beyond 75%. They showed that they have been owning shares below 75%. But if you add the shell companies' investment in these firms, which are especially the shell companies linked to Vinod Adani, then all the companies, promoters' shareholding, it comes to way over 75%. In many cases, it crosses even 90%. So this was the main allegation on which the SEBI has been investigating the matter. We will come to the Supreme Court case subsequently.
Okay.
The main revelation in this round was that among all the companies, the shell companies that were named, 2 out of them are ones which were also used by the SEBI chairperson from 2015 onwards to invest her own funds. Okay. So they raised this conflict of interest issue, and they also raised 2 more serious conflict of interest issues. One was vis-a-vis the SEBI chairpersons continuing to hold an office of profit a private company, I think she is still a 99% shareholder.
I'm going to come to that 99% shareholding in Agora. But before that, let me fill in a few details and I'll ask your comments on it. Now, the report, which was the second Hindenburg research report of the 10th of August, it says that the SEBI chairperson, Madhavi Puri Butch, she had a stake in what they describe obscure offshore entities which were allegedly used in the Adani money siphoning scam. Alleged. Now, the Hindenburg has quoted documents it claims it got from a certain whistleblower, unnamed. And to quote Hindenburg, it says, "We had previously noted Adani's total confidence in continuing to operate without the risk, I beg your pardon, of serious regulatory intervention, suggesting that this may be explained through Adani's relationship with the SEBI chairperson, Madhavi Puri Butch." Now, these whistleblowers are saying that she and her husband, Dhaval Butch, both had stakes in these, what is described as obscure offshore entities, and they are based in Bermuda. But two other points need to be mentioned. She says her denial, Madhavi Puri Butch denial, she says that this is an attack on the credibility of the market regulator, SEBI, Securities and Exchange Board of India, and it has indulged in character assassination, that they're trying to assassinate her character. In her statement, the one which she issued together with her husband, Dhaval Butch, was that she had become a whole-time member of the Securities and Exchange Board of India in April 2017, and she held that position till October 2021. Subsequently, in April 2022, she became the chairperson. Now, what she says is that when she was a Singapore-based private citizen, and 2 years before she became the whole-time member of SEBI, and he said the decision to invest in this fund was based on a decision because the chief investment officer of this fund happened to be her husband, Dhaval Butch's close friend, childhood friend, and they studied together at the Indian Institute of Technology in Delhi. And he was a former employee of Citibank and JP Morgan and so on and so forth, and had a very strong career in investing. Now, she says that in 2018, he left the fund, he left as the chief investment officer, and at no point of time did the fund invest in any instruments, bond, equity, derivatives of any Adani Group company. What she has not mentioned, and which is now common knowledge, is that this person, Mr. Anil Ahuja, also happened to be a director of a flagship firm, Adani Enterprises Limited. The question that now arises, did she disclose this information after she became a whole-time member? To whom did she disclose this information? And in matters concerning the Adani Group, did she recuse herself from the proceedings when these cases were being investigated by SEBI? Yes, your views.
First of all, the SEBI chairperson's counter-attack, that this is character assassination, it is not at all convincing, because ultimately, if you look at her statement, she is actually admitting she is unable to find any fault in either the documents which Hindenburg brought to the fore, or the conclusions that the Hindenburg has drawn from them. She is not questioning that. In fact, she is admitting it. And when admitting, it is the SEBI chairperson and her husband in their joint statement who disclosed the name of Anil Ahuja. Anil Ahuja's name did not come from the Hindenburg's allegations or revelations. They are themselves saying that we made it because some friend of ours, family friend of ours, was the investment officer, and they are mentioning his entire academic background and all that, which is irrelevant. and also Anil Ahuja's corporate background, several companies are named. But the crucial company that they're not naming was that he was a functional director in the board of Adani Enterprises Limited.
Which
And
is the
Adani,
flagship. That's a
not
flagship.
only flagship company, Adani Enterprises was also being investigated by the SEBI. So that is where the whole thing comes. And I think that the more serious concern regarding this is not only a conflict of interest vis-a-vis the SEBI chairperson herself, as chairperson, but the fact that, as you mentioned, that she was a whole-time member since April 2017. Now, if we look at the entire Adani case, the expert committee, which is the Supreme Court case on this went on for a pretty long time, almost a year. And the Supreme Court appointed an expert committee. The expert committee came to several, conclusions. But the relevant ones were that the SEBI had made certain crucial amendments to its.
Yes, I want you to explain this. The amendments to what are called the SEBI Foreign Portfolio Investors Regulations, the amendments that were made. It was the regulations were in 2014, then in 2018 and 2019, these amendments were changed, and these pertain to what is called ultimate beneficial ownership.
As you would know, the matter is very simple, but the way the financial markets, especially these players, operate is that they make it difficult and complex and opaque so that ordinary people don't understand. The matter is very simple. The ultimate beneficial ownership, the disclosure requirement in India, as in many other jurisdictions, was very simple, that you can't invest through shell companies. So what is a shell company? A shell company is a company where the ultimate owner is hidden. It is not disclosed. And somebody else, several fronts are created in multiple jurisdictions. There are layers after layers. But the Indian regulatory regime did not allow it till a point in time. And then there were several policy pressures built to change that regime. And out of that debate, ultimately what happened was that in 2014, the regulation was not perfect. There were loopholes in that regulation as well. But what happened was that in 2018 and 19, two very crucial amendments were made, which has a direct bearing on this Adani matter. Because in the Adani case, the Supreme Court appointed expert committee revealed that the SEBI had already suspected 13 foreign portfolio investors who they thought, and there's a prima facie actually evidence. I don't know why it was not considered as prima facie evidence. That itself is prima facie evidence that all these 13 FPIs, offshore entities, they had concentrated shareholdings across Adani companies and nothing else. So these companies
these 13 entities seemed apparently to have been set up to invest in Adani Group entities.
Only to invest and transact in the shares of Adani Enterprise and Adani companies. And the ultimate beneficial owner of these companies were declared, but the definition itself of ultimate benefit, actually the ultimate was removed. Ultimate beneficial owner was made into beneficial owner, and it was linked to the definition of beneficial ownership in the Money Laundering Act, which basically said that you had to have a certain shareholding in those companies, those offshore entities, to qualify as the ultimate beneficial owner and so on. It's a very complicated thing. I don't want to get into.
The short point, as you have already mentioned,
is that the amendments allowed these shell companies to invest, and without disclosing the ultimate beneficial owner.
Right.
Now, my point is that the expert committee said all this. They revealed all this. They criticized the SEBI, and they said that SEBI's regulatory policies have moved in the direction of dilution, whereas their enforcement is trying to be more stringent. So
Okay.
you can't, yeah. So they called it a chicken
Let
and
me,
egg problem.
let me ask you to briefly mention another regulation, another change in the SEBI's rules. This also in 2018, and this pertained to what are called related party and related parties transactions. This is a rule which goes by a complicated name, SEBI Listing Obligations and Disclosure Requirements Regulations of 2015. It also appears
Yeah,
that these changes were made in a manner that did benefit the Adani Group.
yeah. The benefit is for is quite apparent because soon after the SEBI chairperson assumed her position, she had this meeting with Gautam Adani in the year 2022. SEBI is on record
11th,
in
11th of August 2022. And there was a
yes,
second meeting on the 3rd of October the same year, 2022.
yeah. So as per SEBI's own disclosure, that meeting was regarding the subject matter of that meeting was regarding the acquisition of two large the shareholding of two large cement companies in India, the Ambuja Cements and ACC,
And
and the state.
essentially, if I can just briefly intervene, by buying up Holcim, this is a Swiss multinational, through an entity which is controlled by Vinod Adani, Adani Group in India became the second biggest conglomerate producing cement.
Yeah, so where is the conflict of interest here? The conflict of interest here lies in the fact that, first of all, SEBI was investigating the Adani Group of companies. Then, during the course of that investigation, the Adani Group of companies have maintained that Vinod Adani is not a related party vis-a-vis the Adani Group of companies.
His own
That was,
older brother, Gautam Adani's older brother.
yeah, but anyway, they have taken refuge to the changes, to the amendments in those LODR regulations that you talked about. Along with the FPI regulations, the LODR regulations were also changed. So the criteria for who is a related party were, they were manipulated so that you can be an elder brother, not only an elder brother, but even a member of the promoter group. And yet you can claim that you are not a related party. They have manipulated the regulations in that manner. But then the problem came that when this acquisition happened, that acquisition had to get SEBI's approval. Now, SEBI, before giving that approval, had to ascertain that, how they are doing the acquisition. And it was revealed that the acquisition was done through a layer of offshore entities, but the Adanis had to disclose that the ultimate beneficial owner of the companies in the case of the ACC and Ambuja Cements acquisition was Vinod Shantilal Adani. Now, this was a contradiction because the same regulator in one case is accepting the fact that Vinod Shantilal Adani is a part of the Adani promoter group because he is acquiring stakes on behalf of the Adani promoter group in two companies, and those stakes are worth millions of dollars. But on the other hand, in other matters pending before SEBI in investigations, the Adani Group is claiming that he is not a related party. So this is a huge contradiction. And I think that the SEBI chairperson had to be grilled by the expert committee. I think that had they known whether she had also made an investment through these offshore funds.
Let me come to the Supreme Court and the expert committee. What are the facts?
Yeah.
The Hindenburg research report, the first report comes out in January 2023. After that, the Supreme Court takes cognizance of the matter, sets up this expert committee. I'm going to come to that expert committee also. The expert committee prepares a report. Then SEBI responds to that report. And finally, in the investigation into the Adani company that started much before that. The Directorate of Revenue Intelligence had issued show cause notices even before Mr. Narendra Modi had assumed had become the Prime Minister of India in May 2014. Be that as it may, what we saw was that the Supreme Court of India told SEBI that please complete your probe, please complete your investigation. There were 24 investigations by April 2024. We are today in September of 2024, and as per SEBI's statement issued on the 11th of August 2024, the one probe is still to be completed. It is supposed to be close to completion. I have one more question about the expert committee, but what do you have to first say about the timeline and what many consider to be somewhat or rather tardy manner in which SEBI has been conducting its probe? Because the Supreme Court, you must remember, the demand was made that you should have an independent inquiry, either by the Central Bureau of Investigation, which is supposed to be India's premier police investigating agency, or by a Supreme Court appointed special investigation team. Supreme Court said, no, SEBI will do it. But we are seeing how long it is taking for SEBI to complete its probe.
I think that timeline is only one of the issues. My assessment after this latest revelation vis-a-vis the SEBI chairperson is that both the expert committee findings and the Supreme Court order, which was based on that expert committee findings, I think that entire judgment has become untenable. Because what did the expert committee say? The expert committee said that there are several problems. Yes, there are 13 FPIs which are being suspected, but the way SEBI has actually manipulated its own regulations over the years, they will not be able to establish, and that is precisely what has happened. And yet, the expert committee said that prima facie, we can't say that there is regulatory failure. Now, you are manipulating your own regulations, you are unable to complete an investigation, then what more proved evidence do you need to establish regulatory failure?
Okay.
But the Supreme Court drew conclusion from that and said that since it cannot be established that there has been regulatory failure, therefore we are giving more time to SEBI. They had said preferably 3 months in January 2024. As you are saying, now it's September 2024, and still the main probe, which is on that 75%, the breach of that 75% threshold, that probe is not yet to be complete. And the point is that it will never be completed because the further questions which these revelations have brought to the fore is that did the expert committee know that from 2017, when the current SEBI chairperson was also a whole-time member, when all these regulations were being changed? Okay. My point is that what was Madhavi Puri Buch's role in those regulatory changes? That itself needs to be proved.
We need, and the opposition says that they need a joint parliamentary committee, and the government has so far not accepted that demand. There's talk about whether it should be taken up by another parliamentary committee. Again, we are not very sure. Prasenjit, we don't have too much time with us. I have a few questions and quick, short answers. We've discussed about alleged conflicts of interest involving the SEBI chairperson, Madhavi Puri Buch, and not just Adani. A lot of other information has subsequently come out. Mahindra and Mahindra, several other groups, several other companies, one company in which she was a 99% shareholder and which provided various consulting services, etc., etc. One of the members of that Supreme Court appointed expert committee was K.V. Kamath, who happened to be heading ICICI Bank, that is formerly known as the Industrial Credit and Investment Corporation of India. It is one of India's biggest private banks. Now, Mr. Kamath, who headed it, Madhavi Puri Buch worked under him. It's a separate matter that she's no longer working with them. He is no longer working with them. Wasn't there also a conflict of interest? member of the committee?
There are multiple issues here, but as you said that, because the ICICI is a different thing altogether, because she had those ESOPs from ICICI, and
Employee stock option plan.
yeah, exactly. And they were for 10 years. They could be redeemed after 10 years. So that itself raises several questions. But, the short point is, I reiterate what I said. I think that the expert committee and the Supreme Court, as well as the central government, all of them need to answer questions. We are not even hearing answers from the SEBI chairperson, and all these institutions which have been directly involved, in this entire affair, they are completely silent. We need answers, first of all, whether the central government or the finance ministry, who is the appointing authority of SEBI whole-time members and the
No,
SEBI chairperson.
she was appointed by the Appointments Committee of the Cabinet, and that comprises Prime Minister Narendra Modi and
means the
Home
government.
Minister
It is
Mr.
the
Amit
government.
Shah.
Yeah. So exactly. So the entire government is answerable. First, whether they knew about all these investments and all these private interests of Madhavi Puri Buch before she was appointed as the whole-time member and as the SEBI chairperson. The expert committee needs to answer whether all these conflicts of interest were disclosed before them, and have they drawn their conclusion, including the conclusions on the regulatory changes, have they drawn their conclusions in the light of these information, or do they need to reinvestigate now in the light of this investigation? And the Supreme Court, which in its order said that the threshold to prove that there is regulatory failure has not been crossed. That is directly, the threshold word is mentioned in the Supreme Court order. I think if these conflicts of interest which have been exposed, they certainly are way beyond the thresholds of a free and fair investigation. I think that the fact that there has been a regulatory failure in so many ways, but especially in the Adani investigation, is more than obvious. So the Supreme Court should open the case.
Okay.
My point is the
We'll have
Supreme
to
Court
wait
should
and watch. We'll have to wait and watch whether the Supreme Court, how it acts in the coming days and coming weeks. Prasenjit, my last question to you. Whenever first the Adani Group has dismissed all these allegations by Hindenburg Research. It says there's no basis, and it's also said these are attacks on India, the country India. India's sovereignty is involved. Now the question that arises is that this kind of conflation of the interests of the Adani Group with national interests has been a recurring feature of the way the Adani Group has reacted. Now we are seeing Indian stock markets going through a bullish phase. Now we'll have to wait and watch. But the point is, what happens in the Indian stock exchanges is not just concerning Mr. Adani or you, it concerns you and me, and not Hindenburg Research. Mr. Adani has said he will sue Hindenburg Research in New York. He said that way back in early 2023. We are still waiting for that to happen. But as we talk, in the last 4 or 5 years, the number of investors have gone up from about 20 million to about 100 million in a country of 1.4 billion people. And those who have their money in mutual funds, in provident funds, in various other schemes, pension schemes, etc., part of that money is being invested in the stock markets. So the way SEBI works or does not work, the credibility of the market regulator, the regulator of the country's capital markets, is a subject of public interest. And
yes, certainly.
And if the credibility of the person who heads that regulatory body is questioned, that means you're also questioning the credibility of the regulator. And this is a matter, this concerns India and India's image to the world at large. And it's not just a short seller based in New York who's trying to make money by shorting Adani stocks. Your final comment.
Certainly, it goes beyond how much money a short seller is making out of their short positions. It is about the credibility of the Indian securities market, the credibility of its regulator, and India's financial stability. As you mentioned, the latest economic survey says that almost 20% of India's households are now directly, indirectly, they're linked. Their incomes or assets are linked to the equity market. Now, with the kind of the allegations which came vis-a-vis the Adani Group of companies, if that is proven, then it itself will actually erode the credibility of both the regulator and the integrity of the India's security market in a very big way.
Prasenjit, I have to end here. We've just run out of time. Thank you very much for analyzing in detail the implications of the new Hindenburg research report on the Adani Group and the credibility of India's regulator of the financial markets, the Securities and Exchange Board of India, and its chairperson, Madhavi Puri Butch. Thank you very much for being with us on this special interview.